Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cosmic Owl Astrology with Louise Eddington. And I'm here with the week ahead forecast for February the 1st through till, oh God, is it 8th? I don't know. What's dates? We need to do away with these silly calendars. No, February the 7th. But anyway, this week, well, I'll talk about the astrology in a minute. What a time we're in. And I just took a selfie of me to upload on the thumbnail, and I'm just laughing. And you might go, well, the world's in a state, but if you haven't noticed, things are starting to turn. So a couple of things that really tickled me, you could say, this morning is Melania, the movie, the documentary at London's flagship View Cinema, one of the UK's largest cinema operators, though it's in the UK, so, whatever. Anyway, for the Friday 3:10 p.m. screening coming up, one ticket was sold and two for the 6 p.m. screening. But also there's various other things, I haven't even looked at the news this morning. I did see something about the two shooters for Alex Pretty's um, assassination or murder, whatever. I've had my thoughts about that one. Anyway, the two shooters, or the border patrol agents, have been placed on administrative leave, as if they shouldn't have been, right away. And a preliminary report says two officers fired their weapons during the struggle, but have not mentioned again the claim from federal officials that he was brandishing a gun, which you could all see clearly that he wasn't. Um, anyway, so that's kind of, that thing with that. Also, Representative Ilhan Omar, who I love, and Ayanna Pressley will speak at a news conference tonight in Minneapolis. Because yesterday, I don't know if you know that some guy, I don't know who that one is yet, sprayed something at Ilhan Omar. So, that's, yeah. Okay, anyway, so things are changing though. People are speaking out, people are going, this is not okay. And I think it's going to start happening globally as well. All right. Anyway, I've pulled cards for the week ahead. So, but again, it's a pretty big week. So we will, I'll flash the cards because the cards made me laugh out loud. So Neptune is in Aries now. Aries is fire, and Neptune in Aries is kind of drying things out and parting clouds somewhat before Saturn joins in. I talked about it on the last video I did, but this is, after a really sleepless night, the first night of Neptune in Aries, my mood has gone whoop, much more fiery. Anyway, use of blades. King. And then Prince of Blades. Oh, I was laughing my socks off. So I'll read all about those at the end. But then I also pulled a card from the Witch Oracle deck, and this is the Creatrix of Cunning. So I'll speak to that as well. But let's get to the astrology. While I'm getting the chart up to show you, and I'll go through my list, I would like to ask you to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. Also, I've finished writing my free ebook that will go out to everybody who subscribes to my email list on oh, that's weird. But anyway, I will send it out to everybody that subscribes to my email list on my website, louiseeddington.com. You can find that link below. I've created a nice little ebook that I think will become a bigger book. So if you would like that download, I don't send out tons of newsletters and emails. I'm not one of those people who emails all the flipping time, but I will be sending more. So you should know that. So anyway, I've also gone through some more changes myself, but it's all good. Oh, and also below, this is all the Sally bit. Sorry about this. My series immersion workshop weekend is on March the 21st and 22nd. It's all recorded. Recordings are available in my class or course portal, community portal. There's also some bonuses. The recordings will be available for 2 months afterwards. It's an intensive. We're going to really work deeply with series. Everybody who registers for it will get a copy of their chart, whether you know it or not, with series on it, and we will look, depending how many people register, we'll look at charts to discuss it, and we'll talk about how you can work with series in your chart. This is building on my book, which is doing really well, thankfully. So there's that. Other things are I am a mentor for OPA, the Organization of Professional Astrology, and I'm starting my second 6-month mentorship group to mentor astrologers and practitioners. I really specialize in people who bring other things into their work, not just astrology. This is about business mentorship. This is about how to get your mindset right and grow your business. I've had a lot of experience, and the people who took part in my first mentorship program in 2025 loved it. So if anybody would like to join, we've got a couple of spots left. Otherwise, it's just going to be a lovely intimate group, which is fine too. Okay, here we go. And that's at opaastrology.org. Again, I'll put the link below, and I'm going to put my document that's got useful articles and things in every description for a while, just about things you can do to help, ideas, because I keep getting people saying to me, I don't know what to do. I think everybody thinks they have to go out and join, marches and things on the street. Well, there's lots of other things we can all do. So anyway, here we are, February the 1st, Sunday. This is officially Imbolc. Okay, so Imbolc is the cross-quarter day, all right, between the solstice and the equinox, which is in March. Now, officially, though, Imbolc in pagan times was when the sun reached 15 degrees of Aquarius, and all those cross-quarter days are at the middle degree, 15 degrees of the fixed signs. But let's go with the Semitized calendar that our society imposed on us for now. If you like, you can celebrate Imbolc for 3 days. So it's IMBOLC, so go and celebrate Imbolc. Really, I always feel like this. That's why I like it's the cross quarter. The light's returning or disappearing if you're in the southern hemisphere, and it's another point of change on the wheel. The sacred hoop, the wheel of life, the wheel of the seasons, the wheel in all ways. Anyway, the wheel, and in the astrology wheel, of course. Anyway, this is where we start the week. Happy Imbolc. We start the week with the moon in Leo and heading right towards the full moon. I already did a full moon video, so you can go and look at that if you really want the details on the full moon itself. But let's look at the other aspects for the day as well, because the full moon is at 5:09 p.m. Eastern. So we start the day with Hygeia over here, which is preventative health, holistic health, but it's kind of got more that seer quality. It's kind of looking into what you need to do to preserve this holistic health, okay, more than finding the cure. That's all how I always see Hygeia. So Hygeia is square to asteroid Lilith as we start the day. And you guys probably all know by now, I call her talk to the hand Lilith. She's a bit like a rebellious teenager and says, no, talk to the hand. I'm not doing that. And if you know the myth of Lilith, she was the first wife of Adam in the myth who would not submit. And so, Lilith, and then she was cast out or she ran off from Eden and all those stories. They're all just stories, by the way. And then she was turned into a demon. There are more Liliths. We have a black moon Lilith. We also have a dark moon Lilith. I kind of see this one as, because it's the only asteroid, it's the only kind of physical Lilith from our perspective. I kind of see her as that original kind of core Lilith. The black moon Lilith is more the shamed, cast out Lilith. But anyway, so this is Lilith and this is Hygeia. So put those two things together. You may feel it in yourself as kind of saying, no, I'm learning how to step into my autonomous wild, to quote the title of my free ebook, and in the sign of Pisces, which is very much about chaos and wild, okay? And women were always portrayed as chaotic and wild and disobedient, right? And we're moving into a new paradigm. But anyway, the square to Hygeia is, and in Gemini, is about thoughts, community, communication. This one to me says, where our perspectives are changing, but how we speak and how we act in the world is speaking. But Gemini, incidentally, is the blades or swords cards in the tarot. So wait for the cards at the end. We are really being asked. I've talked gently about healing from the inside out and all those things, but really it's about time we stepped into our power and feeling full of ourselves as you like. I went to my boxing class this morning and I was looking at myself in the mirror as I was boxing, because I've got this wall of mirrors, not preening that, but more looking at myself and going, oh shit, damn woman. I've worked hard to reclaim my health, but I've also reclaimed my energy and my verve and my drive. It's not just about boxing. I think you get all that. I've reclaimed my zest for life, if you like, over the last few years. And it showed. And I'm like, what's wrong with celebrating that? But anyway, this is about that holistic health. So I've been on a mind, body, spirit journey to reclaim my core kind of autonomous wild woman inside and go, here I am. All right. So this is what I'm trying to inspire you to do. But also men have that energy in them too. Yeah. And saying, this is it. I'm me, and being full of myself is okay because I'm doing it with joy. I'm doing it from this place of, I love myself now. I like myself now. Okay. Most of us don't. And I didn't for a long time. All right, lecture over. So on the way to the full moon, the moon, as I mentioned, is in Leo. The moon will oppose Pluto in Aquarius at 3 degrees and square Haumea, the cosmic egg. Now, I can't really understand why Haumea is not accepted more in astrology than as much as Pluto as well. So I'm just going to read you a little bit from an article I wrote, and this is going to be one of those, isn't it, where I keep going for ages. Okay. Where is my article? There we go. I really need to republish it and write it, call it a different name, because it's not a very good thing. But I just want to read you about Haumea a little bit. So Haumea is the creatrix. Talking about the creatrix card, we've got that. And in this article, I do talk about Haumea and the founding and things. And Haumea was spotted first in 2003 and first nicknamed Santa. And she was renamed Haumea in 2008 after the Hawaiian goddess of fertility and birth. Haumea is one of the most unusual objects known so far. She is roughly the same size as Pluto, but she's a really fast rotating object, one of the fastest in our whole solar system that we know of. She rotates every 4 hours. Okay. Now she has an orbit of 284 years, and Pluto has an orbit of 248 years. So they have very similar orbits in the big scheme of things. She's been described as a football cigar, but she looks like an egg to me. She has an unusual red spot on the rendering of the images of Haumea, which reminds me of the umbilical cord connection to the Great Mother. And how fitting is that for a pure creation goddess in the nature of the Hawaiian creator goddess who birthed Pele and other Hawaiian deities. Haumea also has rings, which is said to be the symbol of a planet. So this is a whole other wrinkle on it. So anyway, I'm not going to go on about it more, but I know we can't include all of these extras in every natal chart. It's just going to be, get too crowded. But I've mentioned many, many times that Pluto and Haumea have been in this ongoing square. The first square was on May the 7th, 2022 at 28 Capricorn and Libra. But gradually the two, Haumea and Pluto, have moved into Scorpio and into Aquarius, and they're going to finish their squares in those signs. And we are about to have, on the day of the solar eclipse coming up, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I always forget how many this is. The ninth square of 13, the number of the goddess or the witch, squares from 2022 to 2028. Anyway, back to today, or back to Sunday. The moon, on its way to full, so heightened energy anyway, makes a T-square by opposing Pluto and squaring Haumea, as those two get closer to their February the 17th, just over 2 weeks away from their 9th square. It's also important because Haumea is about to station retrograde, so she is potent. So I'm going to move it to that. So Haumea, and by the way, Pele she's broken records with her, I think it's her 40th eruption. I think it's calmed down a bit now, but I have to check because Haumea is stationing retrograde. So 3:41 a.m. Haumea stations retrograde at 4 degrees Scorpio 15, and 4 is a number of stability. Okay, but the next square will be at 4 degrees and 12 minutes of Scorpio. So Haumea will have only moved back 3 minutes for this square. What does this mean? I know I'm making this long, but I like to teach you something through these as well. So Haumea and Pluto are similar energy in many ways. Pluto is death and rebirth because Pluto excavates and churns up the shadow that has been long, long buried, and throws it out, ready to be ready for this regeneration or rebirth. Haumea is pure rebirth and regeneration. As a goddess, she gave birth from every part of her body, and then she would get old and then kind of regenerate herself. She is an energy of birth and regeneration. However, birth's not always easy, can be messy. So what does this mean? As we're approaching the full moon, square Haumea, as Haumea is stationed retrograde and opposing Pluto, this is another big turning point, all right? It's huge, to be quite honest, and, this is worth spending some time on. So, okay, so I want to just read the Sabian symbol for this 5th degree of Scorpio, where Haumea is stationing retrograde. The symbol is a massive rocky shoreline. And James Burgess says this is the stabilizing, remember 4 is a number of stability, the stabilizing influence of institutions, the double-edged sword of community which limits individual freedom and yet creates stability and security, realizing that stability creates greater freedom. Read Timothy, whatever his name is, on freedom. He wrote on tyranny and on freedom. Both are great. Anyway, James Burgess says, though slow to form, as is land itself, the ways of a community become firmly entrenched and together create a bastion against the storms and tides of evolutionary change. Society is by nature conservative, since stability is reassuring and promotes investment and commitment to the collective well-being of the group. Now, Dane Rudyard said that it's a massive rocky shore that resists the pounding of the sea. And that is said to say it represents the theme of confronting deep-seated beliefs and inherited patterns, the rocky shore, against the transformative change of the pounding sea, highlighting inner stability, ancestral wisdom, and the need for personal resilience and self-integrity in defining your path. It's about developing inner fortitude to adapt to life's constant constraints and shifts, finding personal freedom through self-reliance and integrating past experiences, even difficult ones, into a stronger, more authentic self. And that was the Sabian symbol for Haumea's station. So I know I've spent a lot of time on this day 1, but I just want you to feel into this energy. It's the 9th of 13. 9 is also a number of endings. We're about to go to the 10th square in the 4, which is number 1 again. 1, 2, 3 we'll have. And so, there's so many layers to all of this. I noticed this square ages ago. I can't remember when I wrote the article. It was, in fact, I'm going to rewrite it today. I wrote it in 2023. It needs an update. But I've clearly noticed these squares, which are really ongoing. This is just the exact on February the 17th. On an eclipse, though. 9th one, because they've never moved far apart, but it's huge. And in fixed signs, especially on the day of a full moon as well, the last full moon before the eclipse, this is very heightened energy. And Leo is the sign of the heart, but also the king. Okay, Scorpio is the sign of power games, manipulation, often, sexual manipulation, and shadows and secrets. And Aquarius is, in essence, the sign of the future and creating the future, and about pulling all those pieces together for the good of humanity. So this February the 1st in bulk is a really big day again. All right, so Okay, I've gone on much too much. Now, after this station, okay, station retrograde, the moon will then oppose Mars. And remember that Neptune has moved into Aries for the next 12-13 years. Again, I looked at that on the last video. And Mars is the guide for Aries. And Mars, in many ways, is the divine masculine. Mars is still under the beams of the sun, though, bit somewhat offline. So we're really being asked to step into our will and drive and really tune in to find it inside. Okay, these cards are going to help. On a collective level, I think we're seeing the shadow of the kind of militarization of police and things like that, not just in the USA, but many places. But also we're seeing the shadow of the divine masculine in many ways, and that power over and power over, control, domination in the culture. So everything's working within you and without. The moon shining on that as the moon is coming to full will reveal more. And then the moon will oppose Vesta, which is both your inner flame and the state hearth. Okay. Then we have the full moon. After that, though, the moon, I'm going to actually get to this one, and then I promise we'll move on. We've got a couple of really big days here. So this day is worth spending some time on. Okay. So on, where is she? She needs moving up. 9:31 p.m. on Imbolc, February the 1st. We can actually see that the sun has moved to 13 degrees. So that's more of a goddessy number, but she's not right at the 15. But you celebrate the whole thing. The moon, still in Leo, just after full, will trine Ceres. And I did talk a little bit about this in the last video, but this is at 15 degrees. This is a world point, actually. 15 degrees of fixed signs is also a world point because it's that point of the cross-quarter days, okay? And so that means it's another turning point. World points, when there's something happening on that degree, it's important. And we're still under the full moon. And it trines Ceres in Mars-guided Aries. This is another indicator of just feeling into your inner power, seeing with the new, the eye of the heart. Leo, letting your light shine out and really kind of starting to take action in this new and newly empowered, autonomous, wild place. Yeah, how much more can I repeat? Anyway, last aspect of the day, you might be glad to know, is Mercury. Mercury, the messenger of the gods, the trickster who flew between worlds, the world of the gods, the world of the humans. He's also very cunning. Mercury is all those words. The trickster is cunning, and we've got the creatrix of cunning card come. And so this is in Aquarius. This is about seeing the bigger picture and starting to weave that new story even more. And Mercury is conjunct Chariklo, the space holder who has been sitting there in Aquarius waiting for us to really start to rewrite the story. But I can see that we gradually are, okay, collectively and individually. Things are changing. And I've just been listening to Octavia Butler's parable of the talents, and she always says, God is change. And, well, God is the cosmos. God is change. Everything's always changing. So anyway, there's that. So February the 2nd. Less aspects, so I'll go through them quickly. We do have Black Moon Lilith gets a little bit active on the February the 2nd. She's bobbing back and forth, and remember, she is that one who represents shame, or where we feel shame, or where we've been shamed, where the divine feminine has been shamed in all its forms. It's in men too, men who get called a sissy or a wimp, for expressing that kind of raw feminine energy rather than the masculine doing energy. Okay. And so, we can see that being shown up in every way. But Black Moon Lilith is in Sagittarius, the sign of the future, the sign of bringing truth to light, and she squares off to her sister Lilith, the original one, saying, talk to the hand. We're just not doing this anymore. We are going to change our perspective, change our views. It's still really in aspect to Hygeia. So come to wholeness and find that inner thing. Get my ebook. It's free. Anyway, then the moon will actually reach 19 Leo earlier in the day. So I need to change that. I'm just going to edit it to AM actually, because that confused me. So earlier in the day, we start the day with the moon at about 17 Leo, but then the moon comes up and starts to oppose all of this. So, the moon will oppose Venus. Where's Venus? At 20 degrees. The moon will oppose, then the moon will oppose Chariklo and oppose Mercury. And look how these three are so tight now. Mercury is about to move 10 degrees away from the sun, the first personal planet to get back online this week. Expect the ideas to start flowing, but we're not quite there yet. So I'm still under the full moon. The moon opposes the space holder, the helping us to weave and spin this new story, and then opposes Mercury at 22 degrees, the master builder number. Then the moon will trine Chiron. So, this is an ongoing kind of look at the wound, then find the medicine and bring it in. And in fire, we can literally cauterize the old wounds. But you can see, look at this. I know, I'm here again, spending more time. We actually have this fiery grand trine. And I love that we've got the king, which is fire, but also those blades cards. Whilst they are air cards, because they are blades is swords, is air. This is fiery air, okay? The cards I picked anyway. So look, we've got a kite now. We've got a fire grand trine, and we've got this kite. This is saying burn off and cauterize all those old ideas and step into that fiery self. Okay. I'm chuckling because I can see out of the corner of my eye the picture I chose to do that Haumea article. Unbelievable. Anyway, we'll move on. So then the moon will trine Black Moon Lilith exactly, will sextile Haumea, and then will trine Eris, so table turner as well. This is all saying we're not going back. This is kind of rise up, saying no, this is not okay energy, all of it. Then later on February the 2nd, I am going to get to this square. The moon will get to, and I will just readjust you, 27 degrees of Leo, and will square off to Uranus. And I do want to add fixed star Algol, because Uranus is... So Algol is Medusa, and Medusa's story is being rewritten as one of fiery rebellion again, of saying, look how you've hurt me, and the snakes of the divine feminine rising up, and she's turned into this monster Gorgon, really to say, I'm turning into a monster, if you like, to take it all down. So, the patriarchy is going to go down. But anyway, Uranus, change, lightning bolts, aha moments, sudden change. This is in fixed signs. It could involve more Earth movements. We've got all this solar flares and earthquakes going on. So everything, again, operates at all levels. But the reason why this lunar square is important is because we're still under that full moon energy, and Uranus will station direct on the 3rd, but we'll look at that in a second. I just want to finish the day. So the moon is kind of activating Uranus while it's at its station degree and minute, conjunct Algol. God is change. We are change as well. Anyway, Mercury over here, still in Aquarius, which is Uranus guided, by the way, will sextile Chiron, so fire and air, saying we are going to do this, we are going to heal this. And in fact, let me get it exact. These are such big times that I think it's worth seeing the procession of this in detail. So Mercury, sextile, sorry, Chiron. So you can see it's 7:32 p.m. But the reason I got it exact is that Mercury is still not quite back online. Mercury has not quite moved 10 degrees away from the sun. So Mercury is going to emerge from there with all that is learnt in the last few weeks and start speaking and shouting out. And also kind of, we may see more marches, more community stepping up for the people, more people speaking out. There's actually an interesting one, and I am going to share the name. I have a friend who is married to the ex-husband of Martha Stewart. You'll know Martha Stewart. And anyway, they have had a lot of differences, shall I say. And Martha Stewart has been, shall we say, an interesting person throughout her life. She actually spoke out about what's happening in Minnesota because her young daughter shamed her, Lilith, for saying you can't not say anything. You are this big figure with a big voice. And Martha Stewart was quite open about it, said, almost, I've been shamed into speaking out and this is not okay. You're going to hear kind of more of that kind of stuff. I'm not saying you go around shaming and cancelling people. It's just going to start happening, okay? People are going to feel ashamed that they didn't take a stand before, all of this kind of stuff. And it's not just about Minnesota, of course. It's about like the Epstein files, all those things. So anyway, then the moon moves into Virgo for a couple of days at 10:21 p.m. and squares off to Sedna in Gemini, who I do not have on here. Agent of major change, in communities, in how we live. So, but that happens every month. So, on to February the 3rd. Oh gosh, what times we're in. 3rd a.m. because I like to be back in the morning for the start of the day. One thing I do urge you to look at by February the 3rd, which is Tuesday, look at how this is all really piling up even more. Yes, Neptune has left the Pisces building, but Pluto, Mars, they're all, well, not Pluto yet, but Mars, the faster moving, Vesta, Sun, Venus, Chariklo, Mercury, are all moving towards Pisces. And then gradually all of this is going to move towards Aries, except the South Node. And then, North Node, which moves reversed. But anyway, so February the 3rd, early in the morning, Moon's in Virgo now and opposes the wise owl, the strategist. Okay. And so that's Pallas Athena. So Moon opposes Pallas Athena and says we can start to see through these clouds of Pisces to do the right thing and find more meaning and work. And so, there's, again, lots of layers. That's all I'm going to say about that one because this is too long. Then we have Venus. Venus meets Chariklo. First, Mercury did. Mercury's still not quite under the beams, But Mercury met carry close, so that was the mind with about how we are weaving the new story from all this information and ideas and thoughts and shifting thought patterns and things like that. Venus brings our heart and relationships and values into it too, into this reweaving that we are doing in so many ways. Then on later February the 3rd, Mercury will trine Hygeia. Again, still slightly under. So it's activating that mutable Grand Cross that we looked at with Black Moon Lilith, Hygeia, and Asteroid Lilith. And, the Divine Feminine is going to start shouting really loudly. And I prefer to call it that because it will be women, but it will also be men too who are doing the right thing. Okay. So the moon conjunct the south node then. Okay. So we have the moon conjunct the south node. And I'm not going to move it to the point because this occurs at 9 degrees and 2 minutes. And then the nodes are going to start shifting to 8 degrees, where they'll stay for 8 weeks through the eclipses. So this is one last look. Moon is the people in the world, events, astrology, mundane, but it's also our emotions on the moon's own south node. This is saying let go of what we thought was the right thing in the past to do the right thing now, or to do it more meaningful. And it's also about being holistic again in Virgo. It's also that priestess energy, the Mary energy. All those energies are going to come to the fore as this processes through the week. Then later on February the 3rd, Mercury will sextile Eris, the table shaker. Okay, so, and that's at 2440. So, nope, not going to get it out. And then the moon will trine Pholus, which is, seeing where we've been out of integrity, seeing where our institutions and systems are not in integrity anymore, so that we can recreate them. All right, Ken, all of this keeps repeating onto the end of February the 3rd. The last lunar aspect on February the 3rd is the moon trine Juno, our sacred contracts with each other. Real good look at that, and where we need to reinvent them, but also rediscover our sacred contracts with each other. Then we have Uranus. Uranus will station direct. And I'm including this on my week ahead forecast because I don't have time to do too many more videos at the moment, and that's okay. Now then, Uranus stations direct. I already mentioned that Uranus stations direct at 27:27. Taurus, conjunct Algol, Medusa, the monster, all of those things. Oh, this world is amazing. So, but 27:27, the number of the Bodhisattva. The 2 is the Divine Feminine. The 7 I consider to be kind of the most intuitive and spiritual of numbers. Adds up to a 9, which is endings. Again, mentioned that with the 9th of 13 Pluto Haumea squares approaching. But I want to read you the, actually I'm going to read it. I put 27 Scorpio Sabian when we go up to 28, and which is the opposite point, and I don't think there's ever any accidents. So the Sabian symbol for 28 Scorpio opposing where this is happening, this Uranus, lightning bolts, sudden change, ahas, all those things, is the king of the fairies approaching his domain, which is awareness of deep desires, the power of focused imagination to manifest goals, and the need to trust intuition to explore the unknown. I'm not going to read it all because I want to read you the one for Taurus. But I find it interesting that I pulled the King card too, right? And this is interesting. This has got several different ways of reading it. So I'm going to read you what James Burgess said. A woman pursued by mature romance. And James Burgess said, this is about perpetual new beginnings. Limits of the physical body need not stop us from staying alive to new possibilities and opportunities and maturity in relationships. He says the sense of a time-based linear degrading of capacity is refuted. What did I talk about me at the start? By the way, on my metabolic age, I've gone down 20 years, right, from when I started my health journey. We do not need to grow old and die off, but instead always have the capacity to find a new beginning. And I'm not saying it's about the physical health. I think you get the idea. For example, we can fall in love even when this is driven mostly by the heart's joy in sharing rather than sexuality and procreation. We do love to bring it down, but this is a bigger thing. Now then, Dane Rudhyar says a woman past her change of life experiences a new love. So let me go to his description. Isn't this interesting? 28 Taurus. Okay. He says, this is humans' capacity to rise in consciousness and feelings above biological limitations. Now, this one really resonates. After having stated the useful and the aged approach of the human individual to the use of what their culture has brought to them, after having stated the useful and the aged approach of the human individual to the use of what their culture has brought to them, the symbolism of this symbol stresses humans' capacity to rise above the limitations which both biological nature and the normal social pattern of behavior have tried to impose on them. As in many of the preceding symbols, a woman is pictured because at this early stage of the cyclic process, the individual consciousness still has a receptive or feminine polarity. There we go. As was indicated in Aries 1 symbol, which started this cycle and where's Neptune now? Anyway, so whenever this third stage of the 12th sequence of the Sabian symbols is brought to a person's consciousness, the indication is that he or she should freely open their mind to the possibility of always new re-beginnings. Ideally, the new beginning should imply a more mature response to the new possibility of experience. And I think that is happening collectively as well as individually. God is change. Thank you, Octavia Butler, for that phrase. And God to me is the cosmos in general. Not causing, how we respond to it. That's me. Okay, on to the 4th. And again, I'm going to just change it back to the morning. I think we're pretty done with the bigger aspects. So this should go quicker now. But it's another big week. Okay, so on to the 4th, on Wednesday, the sun actually reaches 15 degrees, the world point, the actual in bulk, but whatever. And the Mercury has now moved more than 10 degrees away from the sun by early morning on the East Coast. Back online. Thoughts, words, communication, all the things we've learned in this process of rebirth, regeneration, rebecoming, and what did he call it? Rebeginnings for the symbol. Wild. My mind's being exploded by all of these things. I hope yours is too. And even if you don't understand the astrology, I hope I'm explaining this process and message fully. Okay, so on to February the 4th, as I said. Black Moon Lilith briefly squares off to Nessus, revealing the toxins, the poisons, the truth of it, of where we have been shamed, but also you may discover more areas where you've held internalized shame from our society, from life, whatever. Anyway, then the moon in Virgo still will sextile Jupiter, and Jupiter is retrograde still, but is heading towards the end of its retrograde. But this is earth and water. The moon is now waning towards the eclipses, and so this is a releasing in Virgo. Let go of what you thought all those filing cabinets ideas and thoughts were that gave life meaning, because Mercury's let loose now. It's time to reimagine and regenerate and rebirth and rebegin and all of that. And then the moon will trine my favourite asteroid, Hecate. Oh, I've got the hard copy of Nikita Gill's book, Hecate. The cover is just gorgeous. I have listened to it 3 times, but I had to have the hard copy as well because it's so beautiful. But she is the goddess of the crossroads, and she has the keys to open up and let you see that in a way you're not just at a crossroads. We are at a crossroads. It's the actual Imbolc, which is a crossroads, but all paths lead to wholeness, really. There is no one path. It's about integrating mind, body, spirit, heaven, heaven, earth, and underworld, whatever you want to call them. All of those things. Integration. Coming to wholeness. And then the moon squares Black Moon Lilith, kind of, a little bit more about where the priestess energy or the divine feminine's been shamed. And then the moon opposes Nessus, revealing more of the toxins. The out-damn spot energy is wild. Then Venus. I'm going to get this aspect exact. Will sextile Chiron. Oh, that was handy. Venus will sextile Chiron, but Venus is still not back online yet. And if you remember, we had a new superior, as they call it, Venus star point, back a while ago. Can't remember the date right now. But Venus, that star point as evening star, is not officially visible to us yet. And I always feel like Venus traveling behind the sun, which is what is happening now, is really about her initiation. That's kind of like the initiation of the gods, if you like. And then they bring that message down to Earth. Now, both Mercury and Venus are going to be evening star. Mercury is evening star now. Venus will be very shortly. And that is letting go again. Another releasing, heading towards when they next become morning star and take action after this initiatory outer journey. And then in the Mercury retrogrades and the Venus retrogrades, it's humanity's initiation. Does that kind of make sense? Which is why I do a Venus retrograde class, which will be at the end of September. But also, it's what happens when Mercury and Venus are behind the sun. They are the only two, heart and mind, that have these outer world behind the sun journeys, exterior, where they're kind of blocked by the sun, and then they come online and bring it down to Earth again. Okay. The two most personal planets. Anyway, Venus, though, before she goes back online, she's going to sextile Chiron and both look at the wound and the medicine before she is back online to take action. And then the moon over here, still in Virgo, will square off to Hygeia, preventative holistic medicine again, and then the moon will oppose talk to the hand asteroid Lilith, kind of perfecting this mutable grand square again, but also kind of a bit of a grand cross. Change, integrating new information based on natural laws, all that kind of stuff. Then the sun leaves the degree of in-bulk on late on the 4th and will sextile Black Moon Lilith. But then the moon over here, the last aspect of the day, so I am going to get it right. The moon will trine the god of change, or goddess change. Anyway, late, you can see Uranus is still at its station degree, because it only just stationed retrograde direct for the last time in Taurus, by the way, in our lifetimes, most of us. A few people might live to see that next time, because Uranus has an 84-year cycle, but probably nobody listening to this. But anyway, the moon will trine Uranus. Earth, again, God is change. We have to change how we live on this earth. Okay, well, this is way longer than I expected, but hey. I'm going to try and do timestamps this time, okay, for you, so you can go to each day. But I also take the transcript and break it down to a free written description of each day over on Substack. It's a lot more brief, but even if you want to listen to this and then go back and get a reminder, you can go back and look at the written report. I go into such detail here, sometimes for those who are wanting to understand more of the astrology, right? So, so anyway, on to the 5th. So we're on to Thursday now. We're heading towards the end of the week. And we do start the day very briefly with the moon finishing up the journey in Virgo and opposing Saturn, which has now reached the anaretic liminal change is coming degree of Pisces, where Neptune sat all the time it had been back in Pisces before entering Aries. So God is change, more change is coming, and that's on the axis of, I call it practical mysticism, or integrating the rational and the irrational, all of those things. Okay. Then the moon moves into Libra, the waning moon. The moon is now moving towards that eclipse and will be in Libra for just over 2 days. And the moon will make its first opposition to Neptune in Aries since it moved into the sign of Aries. Neptune in Aries, spiritual warrior, drying out, saying time to take action. Moon, the people, all your emotions in the sign of justice and balance. Okay. And okay, so I'm nearly at the end of all my lists, so let's quickly go through it. Mercury, one more time, a bigger aspect. Mercury is going to square off to Uranus. Sorry, I'll go back to February the 5th at 7:13 a.m. Mercury, remember Mercury's back online, will square off to Uranus. Mercury is in Uranus home sign, and Mercury in some ways is like our mind in here, our perceptions, our thoughts, our voice, and Uranus is kind of like those bigger ideas, like, as I said, light bulb moments. Aha. Mercury's still at the station degree and minute. This is going to bring either some quite shocking news. It could bring shocking news. I kind of feel like it's of the good kind, because Mercury is now moving towards Uranus. But it's shocking change. It's shocking news that will change our perceptions again, or bring a change towards the future we are creating. Okay. So lovely again. I can hear my Roomba is chewing something up in the background, but we'll ignore it for now. The Sun is now moved to 16 Aquarius and will sextile Ceres. We are learning to first take care of our own needs, learn to love ourselves, get my Ceres book, or join my Ceres workshop, which is going to go even deeper, and is kind of bringing that change now, so that we make sure our needs are met, and first our own, oxygen mask on, then we can better help support each other's needs. Okay. I still say we are heading towards the end of this terrible timeline we're in. Towards. Then the Libra moon over here will aspect Pluto with a trine and will semi-sextile Haumea. So it's just activating these big transitional and transformational energies. And then Venus will trine Haumea, but is still not quite online yet. Okay. So she's going to be offline still all this week. So what's happening with this is Venus is kind of becoming something, or she's transforming before she brings it down to us. Okay. So God of Change needs to do an upgrade, thank you, from the center of the cosmos before it is brought right down to us for us humans. Okay. And then Jupiter at the same time really is going to square Ceres. So we've got Jupiter and Venus are making what's called a quincunx, an aspect of adjustment. Jupiter is truth, but also Jupiter was king of the gods. And so there's all these layers again as the patriarchy dies. But, this is kind of saying to me that, we look after ourselves first and then each other, in a nutshell. All that we've got, needs, everything, all those things. Last aspect of the day, Venus will sextile Eris, the table shaker, goddess change. Okay, on to the Friday, Venus Day. We start early in the morning with the moon still in Libra. We'll be in Libra all of the 16th, I think. Oh, sorry. All of the 6th. Yes, all of the 6th. Yes, it will be. Yeah, in Libra all day. The moon will trine Mars. Now then, Mars is at 11. Mars is still offline. So the actions that we take, it doesn't mean don't take any action yet. But our will and our drive is a little bit offline. You still may be really exploring and rewriting that story of your part in all of this by starting to rewrite your own story, and then it will ripple out. That's all I'm going to take. But also, justice could be starting to come, right? Then the moon will also trine Vesta, which is still offline, your inner flame, hearth state. The moon will square Juno, our sacred contracts asteroid, in cardinal signs, and the moon will square Juno at 13 degrees Libra, Capricorn. That's the degree of the Cancer full moon we had a little while back, where the sun was opposite in Capricorn. So that would have been the Cancer full moon before the Leo full moon. That's on February the 1st on Imbolc. So this is going to bring an ending of something that has happened in the last 4 weeks, really. And this is in the structures, and this is justice. This is institutions. Oh, I think justice is coming. My goodness. Starting to. Anyway. Hecate will sextile Nessus. So she's kind of showing us that the only way through is to kind of face these poisons head on, and then we can move on. Okay. The moon will then oppose Ceres, really showing us that we have to look after our own needs first, and then we can look after the needs of others, and all of that. And then the moon, the Libra moon, will trine the sun, an air trine, lots of ideas, lots of thoughts as the moon starts to wane and we move towards the eclipses. Change again is coming. Something could really be in the news though on that waning moon. Then on Friday, Mercury will move into Pisces. And by the way, I'm just going to look up something else because there's been so much. Anyway, Mercury moves into Pisces on Friday the 6th, and Mercury is going to go retrograde in Pisces, but does not hit the shadow of that retrograde until it gets to 8 degrees. But Mercury is going to spend longer in Pisces than it has done in other signs. Now it's back online. Now Mercury in Pisces is very much about using that intuitive, downloady kind of energy. It can bring mixed communications, chaos, confusion, confused thinking, all of those kind of things as well. But let's look on the positive side. I think this long Mercury journey through Pisces, because it's going to be in Pisces, it moves into Pisces 5:48 p.m. on Friday Eastern, and will not move into Aries until April the 14th. The whole world is going to look real different by then. Look at all that Aries. But anyway, let's go back to now because I'm getting ahead of myself. So April the 14th from February. So well over 2 months. And Mercury, usually does not spend that long in a sign. Mercury in Pisces really is about trusting your knowing in many ways as well. And allowing those downloady thoughts to come and really then speaking from that almost channeling space if you're using the energy in a powerful way. So I'm just going to leave it as saying that that's what happens. So yes, Mercury enters Pisces. So we've looked at that. Then the moon over here, still in Libra, will square off to Hecate, showing you the way forward, and then the moon, and showing you that there are many paths to recreate this, okay? And then the moon will make a lovely air trine to Chariklo, that weaver of wisdom, but also the space holder. Now then, no, Venus is still offline. Then February the 6th, late in the evening, the last aspect on this day, Pallas Athena in Pisces. She's also using that creative intelligence, but from that intuitive space right now as well, to strategize in the sign of Pisces. Okay, she will actually trine Haumea, who's just stationed retrograde. So really is still stationed. This is about tuning into that divine feminine energy of regeneration and rebirth. Big time. All right, on to February the 7th, last day, and then I'll go through the cards. Let me just change that. February the 7th. I am going to go back to the beginning of the day to finish the week. So the moon is still in Libra and will be until the moon is going to go into the sign of Scorpio at 2:13 p.m. and finish the week in Scorpio. But for now, the moon starts the day in Libra for the last day of the week, opposes Chiron, the wound and the medicine, to bring the healing and to bring justice. For Eris as well, for outsiders, that has been shoved aside, deemed ugly, blah, blah, blah. If you kind of think of the myth of the wedding where Eris threw to the fairest into the wedding of the gods and goddesses to say who is the most fairest. Really, I think it's an indictment on our society's portrayal of what's beautiful in women in many ways. So beyond the skin, being a good wife, being, all those things that the old guard are trying to cling on to. All right. So no more trad wife stuff. Well, people are still, people are becoming, it's changing over time. But all these are opportunities. More people start to wake up. Okay. Then the moon will trine Hygeia and oppose Eris exactly. So they're all speaking to each other, really becoming that autonomous, wild self. All of us is the only way we're going to really fully come out of this. But I do see more and more people doing it. Get my ebook. Okay. Mercury will briefly square Sedna, spiritual destiny through crisis in this time. Talked loads about that. Uranus, however, is still at 2727, so has not moved a minute from its station direct for the last time in this sign. Will sextile asteroid Lilith. Talk to the hand. That is Eris. That, to my mind, is Lilith, or that energy again of that original divine feminine energy coming back and saying God is change. Moon in Libra still will trine Libra's guide, Venus, still offline, but that is really starting. Air signs are very creative with ideas, inventive. Uranus is inventive. New ideas are coming. I see more and more people talking about constitutions being rewritten and world order changing. Yes, some people are going, oh, I like the old world order, or I like the old constitution still. But more and more people are realizing everything has to change in this extraordinary time we're in. So, before the moon moves into Scorpio, which I will get exactly, Black Moon Lilith will square the nodes. So that's saying, I'm not living this, holding this shame within me anymore. But then the moon goes into Scorpio and things get deeply emotional. And this is really about finding that root chakra empowerment. And sorry, one of my cats is having a bit of a fit. I'll go and see in a minute when I've done. Sounds all right then. The moon moves into Scorpio, ends the week in that. And then the moon trines Mercury. I've talked about what that means. This is really, tuning into that deepest space of intuition, that deepest sense of knowing. But I think it's also going to bring more information and news from the shadows, possibly about Epstein files, things like that. And then the moon will will square Pluto, bringing more to light, will conjunct Haumea and saying we are ready to change this and rebirth it. Incidentally, I know I mentioned all these things I mentioned, like the Epstein files. It could also come up within you. You could discover, another layer of where you've been manipulated or where you've not been empowered from that root core yourself. We're like layers of onions, right? But I mentioned the Epstein files, but I also pay attention to what I read, comments, things like that. It was somebody saying about, how ICE, in the US, in Minneapolis, they are arresting. What about all these criminal illegals? Oof. Oh, I hate it when they call them that. No human is illegal. But, and I'm sure there are criminals amongst some of the undocumented immigrants. But, I've seen many people say, what about all these women that were murdered by them and they did this to them and they did that? Well, they've found now that there's paedophiles and, people on the sex offender registry, etc., who have been hired by ICE. We know that there's all these elite men in the Epstein files that must be outed. And I found myself just going, yeah, it's awful, but it's all men everywhere. Anyway, well, not all men. No, not all men are not rapists, but there are men that do this everywhere in all stratum of society. And there are women that uphold that, but it's been going on for decades and centuries and ages, and we are leaving the end of that age. Okay. Last rant. Anyway, we're ready for that regeneration and rebirth, and saying no, we're not doing it anymore is basically what I'm saying. So I'll end the week with that. Astrologically, enough rants. But it's up to each of us to start, saying no and revealing and naming names and in every layer, and it's up to the beings in a masculine identified body or a male identified body, whatever you want to call it, to also stand up to the men that want to control and dominate as well. Okay, in all levels, institutions, against women, against people of color, and the women, the beings in a female body who support that old way of being. All right. Wake up. I think Uranus might help some more wake up this week, for sure. Anyway, so use of blades. This is Icarus. If you remember the story of Icarus, he and his dad Daedalus, kind of had to escape King Minos. So that was at another age, all right, at the end of another age, right? So Daedalus gathered feathers from the birds that passed by and wax from candles and created 2 sets of wings, and then warned Icarus of the dangers they were about to undertake. Flying too high to the sun would melt the wax. Flying too low to the sea would wet the feathers. They flew, but Icarus got giddy with excitement and soared perilously close to the sun, and his wings started to melt. Icarus tumbled from the sky and drowned. Daedalus landed safely on an island. He never recovered from the loss, grief, and guilt, and the sea to this day is called the Icarian Sea. But anyway, let me read a couple of quotes. Let me hold the card up again, because see, Icarus has wings. But remember, this is blades, so this is about your thoughts, really. The useful energy, the quotes. Never regret thy fall, O Icarus of the fearless flight, for the greatest tragedy of them all is never to feel the burning light. That was from Oscar Wilde. Leonardo da Vinci, another very wise person, said, once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will always long to return. But this really is, let me read what the book says, because I love these cards. This youthful energy can be quite magical and verdant with adventures, possibilities, potentials, and dreams. Here is a swift, excitable energy that flies towards whatever is glistening in the ethers of newness and the unknown. And remember, Mercury is kind of coming out from under the underworld and coming back online. Mercury can be very excitable too, right? By the way. Anyway, impulse rules this optimistic, airy youth and will always surprise others when great ideas arise from this energy. Of course, the ideas may not always be viable, but the youthful opinion is that all will work out in the end, and it usually does. Making decisions will always be a challenge, for there are so many ways to go and so much to see. This youth resists grounding and staying in any particular place. Hidden insecurities are not to be seen. At times this youthful ego brings forth clouds of irresponsibility and dark storms of vanity and hubris, all of which can create a dangerous overconfidence that can lead to a fall from grace. However, one cannot discount this youth who holds a wonderful, exciting vision of life. Here is a vibrant vitality and a powerful life force that is observed and envied by all. The freshness of youth is always noticed, for it holds so much beauty, imagination, adventure, and vitality. I am flying high, this is. So you might feel as Mercury emerges from behind the sun that you are flying high, full of ideas, full of possibilities, full of all that. Embrace it. Don't, for the moment, enjoy that youthful rush. All right. You may find that not everything's viable, but anyway. But I think we have to remember what card follows these, because these three cards are together. And this is the Aries card, basically. This is the King. This is I am powerful. So interestingly, this deck takes place in Minoan Greece. So this makes our ending of where we're at in the ages very interesting in response to this quote. The last Western society to worship female powers was Minoan Crete, and significantly that fell and did not rise again. Well, guess what it is? Okay, so this is I am powerful, and this is remembering you're powerful. So I don't think I'm going to say any more. This is about remembering you are powerful. Okay, and then the last card in the process of the cards is the Prince of Blades. I am brilliant. This is Androgeus, okay, which was King Minos's favorite son. Much loved, intelligent, learned quickly, highly skilled athlete, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he tried to kill the bull. So in other words, he could not kill the bull, which was in some ways, was the last representation of worshipping female energies. So anyway, let me read a couple of quotes, but this is I am brilliant. Fear comes at me like a massive bull with lowered horns ready to gore. But I have learned of the insubstantial nature of fear. If I stand my ground, it will pass right through me, which was Richelle E. Goodrich. And then there's another quote from Liania Van Zandt. Accept and acknowledge your own brilliance. Stop waiting for others to tell you how great you are. Believe it for yourself and about yourself. That's it. I'm not going to read any more. I'm going to go to the last card, which also is very mercurial because trickster, remember, and the fox is on this. So this is the creatrix of cunning. Wily fox, cunning, clever. Now let me read you the text from Angie Sullins. Her name is Cunning. Foxes, like women, have deep cunning. The word cunning comes from an older Middle English word known ken. We still use that in Scotland, actually, over in the UK. Do you ken? Which is a range of knowledge or sight. Within a toxic patriarchy, cunning women are thought of as conniving or manipulative. But a witch understands that a woman who uses her cunning employs the deep internal sight and wide-range vision that leads her to building an authentic life, true to her own imaginings. When we excavate our deep knowing and trust its messages, our soul sight grows sharp, and our instincts return to the untamed power we were born with. Sharpen your cunning to cut away what no longer serves. Your life deserves the fierce protection that feminine discernment can bring. I love you. What a week. I know it's extraordinarily long. I'm sorry. But we're in such amazing times, and I really feel I am compelled to go into depth so that you can navigate these energies in a really powerful way, as well as learning some more astrology. Bye.